Welcome back to the Plan Your Federal Retirement podcast. I'm your co-host, Micah Shalansky, and I'm excited to talk to you today because we've been talking about a lot of great stuff at the beginning of the year, but really kind of diving in more depth into how your benefits work. And now, as boring as that sounds, we're going to try to make it as exciting as we possibly can because these are key benefits that you need to know. And more importantly, it's mistakes that we find and how to avoid them. And to help me out with this, I invited back a reoccurring guest, Christian Sakamoto. Christian, how you doing, bud?
Micah, I'm doing well. Enjoying the wintertime here in Washington State. How's it up there in Alaska?
Oh, come on. It's our winter wonderland of paradise. We're actually getting light now. I won't say how much light we have. We'll just leave that as a mystery. But we're gaining light now versus losing light. So we always like that. Still definitely winter for us, but we enjoy the winter. So not too shabby.
Very good.
And Christian, I think you might have been here for it, but one of the times is not. One of the things we always look forward to in February is the start of the Iditarod, which is world famous. And they have the FERS, which is right before that. So it's a giant winter carnival. And FERS is like rendezvous. So it used to be when the fur traders got together and exchanged all of their fur. We don't really do that one part today, but it's a big winter carnival. So all the things you'd think at a carnival are outdoors. And the temperature can vary. It could be like 40 degrees positive. And we've been at when it's 20 and 30 below, right? So you got a big temperature swing depending on the year, what it could be. But it's a very Alaska thing. Everyone gets decked out in their furs and you go out and you just enjoy the cold and the carnival, having a great time. So there's always things to do in the winter, including Ferrande, which is amazing.
That's right. I have been to it. My kids enjoyed it last time. So if you haven't been to Alaska, try to come in February. And that would be a fun thing to do. Add to the bucket list.
All right. Now, February is Christian's advice, by the way. I tell people the last 2 weeks of May, the first 2 weeks of June. That's the most beautiful. But yes, February is still pretty fun. Well, Christian, I don't know of a good transition from that back to our topic today. So hard left-hand turn for us. But yes, let's jump on to not just Alaska benefits, but federal benefits. And this is something that's so important because, again, these are mistakes that we see. So we're going to talk a little bit about 2023, working with hundreds of federal employees. Boy, I guess that's an incorrect number. Thousands would be a more correct number. Thousands of federal employees directly and indirectly, tens of thousands, right? Through the podcast, through the YouTube, through the articles that we write, etc. And really wanted to make sure we're honing in our benefit skills, but also pointing out common mistakes that we see. Now, to keep you entertained, we're going to make sure we hold those mistakes to the back end of this podcast for you there. But Christian, let's kind of dive through this kind of one bullet point at a time as kind of what are some key things. And if it's good for you, I think what we do is we start off with kind of the number one thing that often gets missed when people are thinking about benefits is they're not taking a step back and thinking about the heartbeat of their retirement, are they?
That's right. And what is that heartbeat? Well, if you've listened to the podcast before, it is cash flow. And for our clients, when we're working with them, we're always checking in on what cash flow is. And we do say this is the heartbeat of your retirement planning. And it's so important understanding what money that you're bringing home right now, whether you're working or not, and how much you're spending as a household. And if we don't have a good handle on it, then all these other planning opportunities that we want to do or understanding what our pension values are going to be, they're going to make a lot less sense if we don't even know how much we're spending right now.
Amen, right? What we're solving for at the end of the day, between your pension, between your TSP distributions, when to turn on Social Security, how to do tax planning, at the end of the day, we're solving for cash flow. We're solving for how do you have the retirement that you want to have. As we already know, when we have enough cash flow, life is great. I get to do a lot of amazing things. When I don't have the cash flow I want coming in, it's like, ooh, all right, this is painful. So how do we kind of get past those things? So number one, always be intentional about what we're solving for. That's kind of a really big thing. Christian, I know you run into this too, but I have clients or new clients who will come in and be like, Micah, where am I compared to somebody else my age? Where am I compared to someone else 5 years from retirement? I'm like, well, do you want someone else's retirement? They're like, no, I want mine. I said, great. Well, let's not compare you to somebody else because it doesn't matter. Let's compare you to you. And are you on track for your retirement? Let's stay focused in that lane.
Agreed. Very much so. Well, let's transition now. And after we know what cash flow is, assuming we know that, we need to now look and see what will that FERS pension, the annuity benefit be? What is that and how is that calculated? So the benefit is a very simple formula. we take your creditable service, your years, months, and days of creditable service. We multiply that by your high 3, the highest 36 consecutive months in federal service. And then we multiply that by whatever your pension multiplier is. For a lot of you, it's going to be 1%. For some of you, it's 1.1%. Could be 1.7% for special provisions, maybe even foreign service. So again, credible service times high 3 times your multiplier. That number will determine the gross unreduced benefit, unreduced pension benefit, right? Again, keyword there, gross. So we'll in a later bit talk about what we need to do to get to net, but that's very helpful as we have to first understand how is that benefit calculated.
That's right? That understanding what that credible service time is, this has got to be something we talk about a lot, but we keep seeing mistakes about it, right? So we're going to keep talking about these things. But in short, creditable service is time that you've paid in to the federal retirement system, right? That is the short answer of it. And if you have time you did not pay into the federal retirement system, well, then we might have a little dispute or a little question about, is that creditable service or not? So that's the number one thing, is figuring that out. Is it straight first time? Have you bought back the military time? If you have FERS, you haven't made a deposit or redeposit for any FERS time. Your sick leave, of course, as we know, your sick leave doesn't count to make you eligible to retire, but sick leave now counts towards your pension in retirement, which is absolutely fantastic. So we love the aspect of looking at that creditable service. And in order to help with that, we always recommend 2 things. Number one, make sure you go get every single SF50 you were ever issued. Now, in this case, people are like, oh my gosh, I have 30 years of service, 25 years of service. That's a ton of SF50s. Yes, you are correct. But this is what's really important, that if you go to retire and OPM incorrectly calculates your creditable service for retirement, what's the document we can rely on to prove creditable service? It's not your LES. It's not your W-2. It is your certified summary of federal service, which is your second assignment, or your SF50s, your notification of personnel action. You got to make sure you have those SF50s. Now, the other one I snuck out real quick was that certified summary of federal service. Boy, the form number's drawn a blank for me, but it's in the retirement paperwork. And that's a really important one that you request. And you make sure you get, and that'll be your HR documenting, hey, how much credible service do you have or not have for retirement?
That's right. That's right. And then once we have your credible service, assuming we have your retirement service computation date, then we can go through and see what are those retirement gates that we need to meet for an unreduced immediate pension. Another piece to this is knowing what your MRA is, right? And your minimum retirement age is very important in order to meet those gates, because if we want to retire without having a pension that is going to be reduced, the name is drawing a blank for me, Micah. Do we know the name for the pension if we retire before MRA?
Yeah, if you retire before MRA, then it's a deferred retirement, right? If you separate before one of your gates, right? So you got your 3 different gates. You got your MRA and 30 years of federal service. So let's say your MRA is 57. So it's 57 and 30 years of federal service. It's age 60 with 20 years of federal service, or age 62 with 5 years of federal service. So those are our gates. And if you don't meet those, you want to leave early. The great news is you can, but then you go into this deferred retirement. And then, Christian, there's some pros and cons of the deferred retirement, right? The pro is you still get a pension, but there's a cost to it, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. For every year younger than 62, there would be no health insurance, which is another big key indicator there, that we don't get to keep your FEHB under a deferred retirement.
Amen. That's the big one we really got to watch, right? Is that lack of health insurance. You don't qualify to keep health insurance in retirement. And the health insurance you hear us talk about is one of the best benefits that you have. So understanding these rules, right? What is a deferred retirement? What is a full retirement? What is a postponed retirement? And are you eligible for those things is really, really important.
That's right.
So, Christian, let's talk a little bit about, we talked about the MRA, right? And that's just a simple chart. What year were you born? And the MRA kind of kicks in. It's set up for that. But then let's talk a little bit about Social Security and the supplements. There's a lot of confusion that kind of come right around here is, of course, as you know, your benefits were based on three things, right? Your benefits were based on number one, a pension, number two, Social Security, number three, your TSP, your thrift savings plan. Now, you can retire at 30 years of service and 57, your minimum retirement age, and you can leave, which is great. But your Social Security doesn't start till you're 62. So you can get a supplement, which is calculated based on how long were you a civilian federal employee divided by 40 times your age 62 Social Security benefit. And you get this additional income that comes in from retirement to age 62. Pro and a con, and I've done a lot of FERS federal fact checks about this as well, is that it comes with an earnings limitation. So if you make more than what's roughly $22,000 a year in 2024, if you make roughly more than that, for every $2 above it, they're going to take $1 away from your supplement, not your pension, but your supplement. So you got to be careful. And then the question really becomes to, when the supplement ends, when do you turn on Social Security? So a question to ask yourself is, do you have a strategy to take your Social Security? And if you don't have a strategy for it, it might be worth a discussion about saying, okay, you have an age range between 62 and 70 to turn on your Social Security income. That doesn't mean when you're 62, you should necessarily just turn it on. There's pros and cons to think about. So what's the strategy for maximizing that Social Security benefit, not just for you, but if you're married, for your survivor as well, because the decision you make affects your survivors, your spouse's Social Security income potentially. So we really got to think about what that is. So you got your FERS, you got the supplement, you got Social Security. These things are really important. And then, Christian, we also have, if you retire at 57, you're really not going to get set up for a cost of living increase or a COLA adjustment till several years later, right?
That's right. So if you did retire with an MRA plus 30 or a 60 with 20, those COLAs don't actually start until the December after you turn 62. And that's when they start getting calculated, and it's applied then in January. So there could be several years there where your pension does not go up with inflation. And if we're looking at kind of where inflation's been more recently, that could have a big impact in your overall cash flow plan if you retired and you didn't get any COLAs. And oh, by the way, inflation was 9% back in 2022 and 3.2% back in 2023, right? So got to have a plan for that the COLA as well, and understanding that it doesn't actually kick in until 62.
Yeah, so we got this gap in time, right? Then, as we talked about before, the COLA isn't the full COLA; it's the diet COLA, right? If it's between 0 and 2%, you're going to get it. But if it's between 2 and 3%, you only get 2. If it's above 3%, you get 1% less than COLA. And so your pension is designed not to keep up with it. So not only is it a delay, it's going to take a while for it to kick in potentially. It's not going to be the full amount. Now, Christian, let's say you retire at 57. You have your pension come in. There's no COLA till 62. Trick question. Does that mean your pension stays level for that 5 years period in time? Your net pension?
Yeah, that's the trick question, right? Is the net pension. So unfortunately, it would even decrease, because what we're seeing is with inflation on your health insurance benefits, the FEHB, those go up every single year, right? We could definitely see not only a level pension, but also probably a decrease again as the health insurance companies ask for more money every single year, right? So we got to be having a plan for those years between whenever you retire in 62.
Amen. Right. So your cash flow is going to go down. So what's the plan to change that, especially when we have inflation like we've had in the last several years? So Christian, this is a good kind of transition for us to move into mistakes that we see. And there's a decent amount of mistakes that can get made. Now, odds are, right? So I don't want to be just a whole naysayer here. Odds are you're going to retire with no mistakes. The odds are in your favor that you're going to retire. Everything is going to go over fine. OPM is going to correctly process your pension, and you're going to get what you expect out of it. However, there's a substantial chance, north of 20%, that you could retire with an error in your pension. And where do we get these stats from? We get these stats from OPM. OPM every couple of years releases where they're at with retirement, how many mistakes that they know of that were made. Why do I say that they know of? Because, well, they can't report the ones they don't know about. And there's a lot of mistakes that get made in retirement. So odds are pretty high that you won't have one. But there's also a significant chance, about 1 in 5, you're going to have a mistake in your retirement. So Christian, let's run through some of these ones that we see. And again, it's very similar to what we talked about. Number one, I'm going to say it's creditable service, just what we were talking about at the top of the podcast. So important to know what that is. Right along those same lines, I'm going to say it's the divorce decree, right? And this isn't so much an OPM issue. Sometimes it is. Sometimes OPM does not, in my opinion, read the divorce decree correctly, and we have to work with them for months, if not years, to get it fixed. Yeah, that's right. You heard years. But a lot of times it's clients not understanding what that divorce decree says. You read it the way you want to read it, not the way it is written. And unfortunately, we have to be the bearer of bad news when we get that divorce decree from you and you're like, yeah, my pension, my ex-wife doesn't get anything. And I'm looking at this and it says, nope, she doesn't get anything. She gets half. 50% is what, no, it doesn't say that. And we got to go through the agreement line by line. And sure enough, that's kind of what it looks like. So really understanding not what you think your divorce decree says, but what does someone else who understands this think your divorce decree says?
Absolutely. Well, another possible mistake could be just having the wrong high three or knowing what the high three expectation could be, right? So it's going to be your base pay, which is including your salary plus locality, but it's not going to include things like bonuses or any of those overtime hours, right? So we got to know how your high three is calculated and making sure we have that accurate number going into retirement as well. And I would say, though, when I've seen those retirement estimates get put together from various HR departments, they usually do a very good job knowing what your high three is. That's very easy for them to put together. So
Yes.
I've seen them do a good job. I'll give them kudos for that. The HR departments, when they put those estimates together on the high three.
Other one, oh, sorry, Christian, it looks like you were going to go right for it. Go for it, bud.
Yeah, part-time. This is a possible mistake that we could be thinking about if we had a history where we've worked part-time in the federal government. There's a particular multiplier that we have to apply to our multiplier that I mentioned earlier, that 1%, 1.1%, or whatever that multiplier is for you. So it's a prorated number if we've worked part-time. We take your total hours worked in FERS, and then we divide that by the total possible hours that could have been worked in FERS during the time that you worked. And if it's 100%, you didn't have any part-time, then we get a 1% multiplier, for example. But if there was, 10% of the time we're working part-time, then it's going to be a 10% reduction in that 1%. It'd be 0.9, which our multiplier would be. So that's another one I've seen that clients will sometimes forget about, as well as that part-time multiplier.
Yeah, really important, right? The next one I'm going to say, we already talked about it, was gross versus net. Yes, I know you hear us talk about this as just as much as taxes, as well as inflation, et cetera, and cash flow. But gross versus net is so important because we still see this mistake. It's not what we think our pension's going to be at the gross. It's how much are we getting at the end of the day, and putting together that retirement income timeline. What's the goal desire? How much a month do we want in income? Where's that going to come from on a net basis? So important. And then Christian, another part of this is kind of not understanding how your retirement works, right?
Yeah, that's right. Either it be the thresholds you need to meet, MRA in 30, 60 with 20, 62 with 5, or maybe it's MRA in 10. We're doing a postponed retirement. Maybe we're doing a deferred retirement, which I was blanking on the name earlier, right? But we need to understand what those gates are in order to know what our pension will be. But then there's going to be things around the FERS supplement and those benefits, how long those last, and when it starts and when it stops, and some of those limitations there with our earning potential and having that be reduced. We talked about the COLA as well a bit ago, and having the COLA possibly go reduce our pension quite a bit for not having COLA up until 62 if we retired earlier than that. So yeah, we got to really understand those rules for retirement.
Yeah, right. And no words on those momentary brain lapses. It's so funny. You know all this stuff, then you go live, then you hit the record button, and those little things just tend to go out of your mind. And it happens to all of us. Amen. The last thing I'm going to say on the mistakes, and this is going to sound crazy, so please bear with me. And our listeners for a long time will know we brought up this multiple times. Following the opinion of HR and OPM versus the rules that govern HR and OPM. There's a huge difference between this. And we've encountered several examples working with people that they followed what they felt was a rule, but really was an opinion from someone that worked in HR and OPM, not a rule. What's the difference? A rule is something I could find in the FERS CSRS handbook or a BAL, benefit announcement letter. If it's not in there, it probably does not count towards your retirement. I don't care if your HR sent you an email that says it's good, or OPM sent you a letter that they signed that said this is how it works. There's multiple times that we could bring up mistakes have been made, and OPM's response is, hey, even though that's what we said, we were wrong. You're responsible for knowing the right thing. You don't get this benefit. So it's pretty brutal. This responsibility is on you and understanding what that is. Even the stuff Christian and I say, right? We do our best to screen our content to make sure it's great, giving you guys the best opinions and advice that we can. But before you go to retire, hey, where are these facts? If there's anything that's outside the ordinary that you're hearing, man, back this up with facts. Where is it in the handbook? How can I count on this if something goes south? Really, really important to know. Well, Christian, this podcast is all about action items, not just you and I getting to jam to have fun, but some important things. So I'll kick it off the first one, and I'll say the first action item, we talked about it in concept, but not too much in depth, but the retirement income timeline. I got to say, this is such a valuable tool for our clients to really understand where their income is going to come from in retirement. When can they count on it? And more importantly, when does certain incomes go away? So if you're not familiar with that, make sure you find out more on our website, planyourfederalretirement.com. Get information how this works and make sure you create it for yourself or have someone help you with it.
Very good. Second action item, certified summary of federal service. Go request that from your HR. The form number is SF 3107-1. It is part of your retirement paperwork. And so it is something that when you go to retire, they will be putting together for you. But it is the official form to determine what your retirement service computation date is. And it's very, very important. And if we can do that now while you're still working, instead of waiting until you're retiring to find out what your official RSCD is, your retirement service computation date is, that is a win. So again, highly, highly recommend getting that certified summary of federal service.
Number 3, I would throw on there, I know you're getting ready to do your taxes for this year. What's your strategy for reducing taxes in the future? I know one of the things I was running into in year end, we're working with a client who is making a lot of income, and the CPA is very much against any proactive tax planning. All they want to do is reduce as much taxes as they possibly can today. I'm like, that's great, but in 3 years, when all of these other things happen and our client's taxable income goes up, they're going to be paying more taxes than they're paying now. Why don't we do some tax planning around that? And she really can't get her mind wrapped around it. So we're kind of struggling with this, but you got to have an advocate in your corner, you or somebody else, but you got to advocate for how over the long term, not 1 year at a time, the long term, are you going to reduce that bill you're sending to the IRS? Super, super important to be figuring those things out. All right, Christian, this is always a blast. I really enjoy getting on and be able to jam on the podcast about these great federal benefits. Our listeners, you know our goal. We want to help another 1 million federal employees with retirement. Click that share, smash that like button. Help us out as best you can. Get this message out there to other federal employees because we want them to have great information. Christian, it was great having you on the pod, bud. And until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.